Remember that moment at the 1988 Seoul Olympics
Yeah.
with Ben Johnson,
Oh, yeah.
this Canadian sprinter, when he just blew past everyone in the 100-meter final?
It was amazing.
Even Carl Lewis.
Oh, yeah.
It was like pure euphoria for a couple days.
It really was. I mean, it was just like
It was
a
unbelievable.
monumental achievement.
But then the news hits that he failed a drug test.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just like
Come
instant.
on.
Everything's just wiped away. His victory is the world record, and it became known as like the dirtiest race in history.
Yeah.
It was just crazy, and that's what we're going to be diving into today.
Yeah, this story really goes far beyond just Johnson and Lewis.
Yeah.
This is like a deep dive into this whole world of performance-enhancing drugs,
Yeah.
which was already huge in the 80s.
Right.
So-
Wow. So to really understand how we even got there,
Yeah.
we need to rewind a bit,
Okay.
back to the 1984 LA Olympics.
Right, because that's where we start seeing the seeds of this scandal being sown.
Oh, wow.
We've got these fascinating insights from Dr. Robert Voy. Okay.
Who was a scientist on the front lines of like anti-doping?
So he was basically trying to catch the cheats
Yes.
back then.
Exactly.
What was that like?
He describes it as a constant cat and mouse game.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Athletes were already pushing the boundaries, looking for any edge they could get. And then scientists like Dr. Voy were just struggling to keep up.
What kind of challenges were they facing? Like, was it even possible to catch these athletes back then?
One of the biggest things that he highlights is just the increasing sophistication of doping.
Oh, wow.
Like they were dealing with stuff like human growth hormone,
HGH.
HGH,
Right.
which at that time was virtually undetectable.
Wait, undetectable.
Yeah.
So how could they catch anyone?
Well, that's the problem.
Uh.
HGH was like this game changer because it could increase muscle mass
Yeah.
and speed up recovery time.
Wow.
It gave athletes this edge that you just couldn't prove.
Right.
And the testing back then was just in its infancy
Wow. So it was kind of like a free-for-all, pretty much. Yeah.
for those who knew how to get it.
Yeah.
So I guess that makes Johnson's rise even more suspicious.
Yeah. Right.
It does. He went from a bronze in '84 to a world record just 4 years later.
It was meteoric, and it definitely raised eyebrows.
Yeah.
Even Carl Lewis himself noticed these drastic changes in Johnson's physique.
Really?
Yeah, like the rapid muscle gain, the sudden increase in power. It was all very suspicious.
And the rivalry between them was already so intense.
Absolutely.
Right.
They were like the two titans of sprinting.
Yeah.
And those clashes were legendary, but this suspicion of doping just added this whole other layer.
Yeah, it was like a powder keg waiting to explode.
Yeah.
And then came the 1987 World Championship in Rome. Johnson destroyed the competition,
He crushed it.
including Lewis,
Yeah,
and he set a new world record.
he did. It was a pivotal moment.
It was.
Yeah, it cemented his dominance.
Yeah.
But it really amplified those whispers and accusations
Yeah, about doping.
about doping. Yeah, it set the stage for the showdown in Seoul.
And what a showdown it was.
Man.
The tension, the anticipation, it was electric.
It really was. It was a global spectacle broadcast to millions.
Yeah.
And for a few days, it felt like we had witnessed a historic triumph.
Yeah.
It really did.
We all know how that story ends.
Oh, yeah.
The positive drug test, the disqualification,
Yeah.
the scandal that just shook the world.
It shook everybody.
It was a massive fall from grace.
Yeah, it was.
Um,
And it wasn't just about Johnson. His coach, Charlie Francis, became this central figure in the controversy.
Oh, real?
Yeah, he even admitted to providing Johnson with banned substances.
Wow.
So he basically blew the lid off this whole systematic doping program that they had.
So it wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a calculated...
Strategy.
Yeah.
Wow.
It seems that way.
And remember, Johnson always maintained his innocence,
He did.
right?
Yeah.
Claimed that he was sabotaged.
Yeah.
He even suggested his drink was spiked at the Olympics. Spiked at the Olympics, yeah.
So he's basically saying that someone framed him.
Yeah.
Were there any investigations into those claims?
There were investigations, but nothing ever conclusive.
Really?
No.
To support his accusations?
No, his claims of a conspiracy just remained largely unsubstantiated.
Wow. That's a wild twist to an already dramatic story.
Yeah.
But before we get too caught up in Johnson's side of things,
Yeah.
there's another bombshell we need to address.
Okay.
What about Carl Lewis?
Hmm.
In 2003, it came out that he had actually tested positive for banned substances
Oh, yeah.
at the 1988 U.S. Olympic trials.
This is where the narrative takes like a really unexpected turn.
Right.
Yeah, it's fascinating how all these years later, this revelation just casts a whole new shadow over everything that happened.
Yeah, it really makes you question everything.
Right. I mean, here's Carl Lewis,
Yeah.
like the champion, the symbol of clean sport, and it turns out he had his own secrets.
ED.
And the big question is, how did he get away with it?
Johnson's stripped of his medal and banned, but Lewis went on to win gold.
Right.
That doesn't seem very fair.
Well, his explanation was that he unknowingly took these banned substances
Okay.
through an over-the-counter medication.
Okay.
And amazingly, the U.S. Olympic Committee accepted this.
Wait, they just took his word for it. Did they even investigate further? Were there any records to support his claim?
The details surrounding his positive test have always been murky.
Really?
Yeah, there were rumors of a cover-up of preferential treatment, but nothing was ever proven.
It's a pretty big coincidence, though, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
I mean, the guy who benefits most from Johnson's disqualification also happens to have tested positive himself.
It certainly raises questions about the consistency and fairness of how these cases were handled.
It does.
And of course, Ben Johnson was outraged.
Yeah.
When the news broke, he felt cheated, robbed of his victory.
I mean, can you blame him? He was made the scapegoat, while others, potentially even his biggest rival, got a free pass.
It seems that way.
What was the reaction from, like, the International Olympic Committee?
Well, Johnson demanded that Lewis be stripped of his medals,
Yeah.
arguing for that level playing field.
Of course.
But the IOC rejected his appeals.
Really?
Yeah, and so the controversy simmered for years.
So in a sense, Lewis was able to rewrite history,
Yeah.
becoming the hero, while Johnson remained the villain.
Right?
And it's a really powerful illustration of how perception can be shaped,
Yeah,
especially in sports where we crave those simple narratives of good versus evil.
absolutely. This episode highlights the complexities of this whole doping issue.
Yeah,
It's rarely black and white.
right.
You know, there are often conflicting accounts, power dynamics at play, and the influence of like these various stakeholders,
Oh, yeah.
federations, and sponsors.
Yeah, it's a reminder that there's often more to the story than meets the eye.
Yeah.
But let's step back from the drama surrounding these two athletes
Okay.
for a moment and look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
What was the legacy of this dirtiest race? Did it actually change anything in the fight against doping?
In a way, yes.
Okay.
The Seoul Olympics scandal acted as this catalyst for change.
Right.
It forced sporting authorities to acknowledge how severe this problem was
Right.
and to step up their efforts to combat it.
So it was kind of like this wake-up call.
Yeah.
A realization that what they were doing wasn't enough.
Exactly. This scandal exposed these flaws in the system.
Wow.
So there was this surge in research funding and the development of these more sophisticated testing procedures.
Okay, so what kind of changes are we talking about here? Were they able to close the loopholes that allowed athletes to get away with doping for so long?
They implemented more frequent testing, stricter regulations,
Okay.
and most importantly, out-of-competition testing.
Out of competition?
Yeah, this means athletes could be tested at any time,
Oh, wow.
not just during competitions.
So that makes it a lot harder to cycle off.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, so it made it much harder to do that undetected.
It sounds like they were determined to catch up to the science and the methods that these athletes were using to gain that unfair advantage.
Exactly. But even with all of these advancements, we still see doping scandals today.
Yeah, that's true.
Unfortunately, we do.
It's sad.
Yeah. Despite the progress made, the fight against doping is ongoing.
Right.
The science is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
And as quickly as they develop new testing methods, new
Yeah.
ways to circumvent them emerge.
So it really is that constant game of cat and mouse,
It is.
with both sides trying to stay one step ahead.
It's a chess match.
And I suppose there will always be those who are willing to risk it all
Yeah.
for that extra edge,
Yeah.
for a shot at glory,
Yeah.
even if it means compromising their health and the integrity of the sport.
Exactly. And that's the real tragedy.
Yeah.
The pursuit of excellence, which we should be celebrating,
Right.
is often tainted by this desire to win at all costs,
Yeah.
regardless of the ethics.
It's a sobering reminder that the human element, with all its flaws and ambitions, will always be a factor in this.
It will.
But despite those ongoing challenges, the efforts to create a level playing field are crucial.
Absolutely. And it's not just about catching the cheats.
Right.
It's about deterring future doping, protecting the health of the athletes, and preserving that integrity of competition.
It's about ensuring that when we see these incredible feats of athleticism,
Yeah.
we can do so knowing that they were achieved through hard work, talent, and fair play.
That's a powerful statement because at its core, this issue isn't just about sports, is it?
It's not.
It's about values, fairness, the kind of world that we want to live in.
And it asks us some really difficult questions.
It does.
Like, what's the true cost of victory?
Yeah.
When does ambition cross the line into obsession?
Right.
And how do we balance individual aspirations with the need for a level playing field?
These are questions we as a society need to grapple with, not just in sports, but in every aspect of life.
Right.
It really is.
The Seoul Olympics scandal, with all of its complexities and moral dilemmas, serves as that stark reminder of the challenges that we face. And it's a story that continues to resonate even decades later.
It does.
It's incredible to think that over 35 years have passed since that race in Seoul,
Yeah,
and we're still talking about it.
it's crazy.
What is it about this event that continues to fascinate us?
Well, I think for one thing, it was like a pivotal moment
Yep.
in the history of sports.
Yeah,
It wasn't just about two athletes
right.
or one single race.
Yeah.
It was like this clash of ideologies,
Yeah,
a reflection of these Cold War tensions that were still kind of simmering.
you're right. The world was a very different place back then.
Oh, yeah.
That rivalry between the U.S. and the Soviet Union
Yeah,
played out everywhere.
it did.
On the athletic field just as much as it did on the political stage.
Exactly.
That's crazy.
And this win-at-all-costs mentality
Right.
that just permeated the era
Yeah.
really fueled this proliferation of doping.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about individual ambition,
Mm.
it was about national pride,
Yeah.
proving the superiority of one system over another.
So in a way, these athletes were kind of like pawns
Yeah.
in a much larger game
We were.
who were often pressured,
Right.
even coerced into using these performance-enhancing drugs.
That's a very real and troubling aspect of this whole thing.
Yes.
And it raises questions about the ethical responsibilities of
Mm.
the coaches, the doctors,
Yeah.
even the governments that were involved in these state-sponsored doping programs.
It makes you wonder how many athletes were robbed
Yeah.
of their rightful victories.
Yeah.
How many careers were cut short? How many lives were damaged by this pursuit of glory
Yeah.
at any cost?
The human cost is often overlooked
It is.
in these conversations about doping.
Right.
We focus on the medals, the records, the scandals,
Yeah.
but we forget about the people
Right.
who are caught in the middle.
And it's not just the athletes who suffer.
No, it's not.
It's the fans,
Yeah.
the public.
Yeah,
Our faith in the integrity of sport is shaken
it really is.
when these scandals come to light.
It's hard to
Yeah.
get back to that.
Right.
Right.
That admiration.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here?
Mm-hmm.
What lessons can we learn from this dirtiest of races?
Right.
Is it even possible to create a truly level playing field in sports?
That's the million-dollar question, and there are no easy answers.
Right.
The fight against doping is this ongoing process,
Yeah.
this constant evolution of testing methods, regulations, and education.
Yeah.
But it also requires like a cultural shift,
Right.
a change in the mindset that prioritizes winning above all else.
It's about instilling a sense of sportsmanship,
Yeah.
of fair play
Yeah.
in athletes from a young age.
Yeah. It really is.
It's about celebrating the journey,
Right.
the dedication,
Yeah.
the perseverance rather than just the outcome.
And it's about holding those in power accountable.
Yeah.
Whether they're coaches, doctors, or sporting officials,
Right.
to make sure that they're creating a safe and ethical environment for these athletes to compete in.
Ultimately, it's about restoring our faith in the power of human potential,
Yeah.
in the possibility of achieving greatness through hard work, talent, and fair play.
Yeah. And the Seoul Olympics scandal, for all of its darkness and complexity,
Right.
really serves as a reminder of why that pursuit is so important.
It's a story that compels us to reflect on our own values, on what we truly celebrate and admire in athletes, and on the kind of legacy we want to leave behind
It does.
in the world of sports.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into one of the most controversial chapters in sports history.
It was my pleasure.
We hope it's given you a new perspective on the complexities of doping, the human stories behind the headlines, and the ongoing quest for a level playing field.
Great.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more explorations into fascinating and thought-provoking topics.